Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Charlie Bros, your host of Disability Landscape. We're here today with another great guest and my co-host, once in a while co-host, Mark Knudsen.
Hi, thanks. Thank you, Charlie. Today we're going to be talking to someone who we have talked to in the past, but today we're going to be focusing on her specific job, and she's with the Autism Society of Minnesota, and her title is Community Resource and Policy Advocate. So I want to welcome Jillian Nelson. Welcome.
Thanks, gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here today.
It's great to have you. Jillian, well, in a nutshell, your job title kind of says it, but what are your functions then with the Autism Society?
I wear a lot of hats, as most people who work for a nonprofit do. By day, I run our information and resource hotline. So if someone is newly diagnosed or a family member has a question about what to do in the next stage of life, they would contact the Autism Society, and I would be the person that would offer them resources or connections to different things in the community, or explain what something that they might have been told it means, and just help them find the path through life with autism. The rest of the time when I'm not talking to wonderful members of our community, I am the policy director for our public policy program. So I'm on Capitol Hill working with legislators or talking to DHS or MDH or Minnesota Department of Education. I'm trying to make sure that we have policies and laws in place that are really in the best interest of people with disabilities, and particularly people with autism.
Okay. Now, I know we had the legislative session that just ended a couple months ago. You guys going to get achievements out of that you're really hoping to get to?
This last legislative session was a phenomenal win for the disability community. With the American Rescue Plan and some increase in Medicaid funding coming through with that, we were able to gain a lot of new programs and dedicate a lot of money in Minnesota to improving the lives of people with disabilities. Some of our favorite wins, we got the PCA wage increases passed and the contract ratified, and then the rate increases to go along with that so that organizations can pay their PCAs a higher wage. We got a bill through very, very last minute that is going to allow PCAs to drive clients for the first time. So instead of having to depend on Metro Mobility and other forms of transportation.
Really? That's a big change.
Yeah, now PCAs can drive clients.
That's a big help, I should say.
And one of my personal favorites is we put in place a task force that's going to work with a number of different types of stakeholders to work on developing a plan to end sub-minimum wage in Minnesota.
Okay.
We are actually one of the states with one of the highest utilizations of sub-minimum wage through Section 14C certificates. And it's time that we find equity for all 5,900 participants.
That is great.
Interesting. Why do you think that Minnesota is so high on that? Any sense of why you think?
So I think Minnesota is a really different scenario than a lot of other states. When we think about Section 14C and sub-minimum wage, we think traditionally about sheltered workshops.
Right.
And these really sad places where people are doing piecework hour after hour. Minnesota has some really unique programs. We have some fantastic day and rehabilitation programs that utilize Section 14C to create really innovative programs. And that is the purpose of this task force, is that we recognize that not all of our sub-minimum wage employment is sheltered workshop based.
Oh, it isn't.
Some of it is through day programs and community programs that are really quite meaningful. So the task force will allow conversations to happen so that we can figure out how to maintain quality programming without losing the human right piece of all people should be paid at least minimum wage.
Okay. And then, someone like me, I don't have a well understanding. Can you just talk a little bit about autism, what they mean by the spectrum of autism, if you can kind of...
Yeah, absolutely. So to break it down into a nutshell, autism...
Yes, if you could, please.
Autism is a pervasive neurodevelopmental disorder. I'm going to break that down into 3 sections.
Okay.
Pervasive means that it is part of the development. So your brain it's always there. It's never going to go away. It's part of...
Okay, gotcha.
Part of all of that. Neuro means that it impacts the brain. And developmental means that it's there through all of the life stages.
Okay.
Okay.
So basically, it's a different way that brains exist and operate in society.
Wow. Okay.
So what do they mean? For me, when I hear spectrum, is there different levels of it? I mean, we did an interview one time with an individual who has Asperger, who said that is part of autism.
So Asperger's was initially a separate diagnosis from autism spectrum disorder.
Or what's separate of
Yep,
it?
in the DSM, up until the DSM-5. In the DSM-5, they removed Asperger's and they put it under one diagnosis of autism spectrum
They
disorder.
did, okay.
And now, when we talk about autism spectrum,
Yeah, that's what I'm currently
a lot of people think that it means that you have some people over here that are really low functioning and some people over here that are high functioning, and you fall somewhere on this linear line.
Right. That's the way I think it.
So the autism spectrum is actually, think of it more as a pie chart.
A pie. Oh, okay.
Yep, so there's all these different things that go into autism. And one person with autism might have a lot of impairments with social and emotional reciprocity.
Okay.
And then not have as many sensory issues. And then they might be really, really intelligent, and then they might have some memory, like,
Sure.
Yeah, so
challenges.
different pieces of the pie.
But then it
individuals have.
changes all the time for everyone.
It
So
changes all.
It can change all the time.
Oh, it can.
So you might meet, and then you might meet a person with autism that has a completely different profile
Oh, right.
within
right.
those challenges. But also, it can shift. So, like for me, I have fairly significant sensory issues. But if I am more stressed out, those sensory issues become even worse.
Oh, they
Oh,
do
okay.
that.
I
Okay.
can, on an average day, I need a significant amount of support with executive function challenges. But on a really, really good day with the proper supports in place, I have very little challenge with executive function. So the spectrum is it's a never moving, flowing thing that really depends on where the person is regulated within themselves and the world around them.
Wow.
So
okay.
it combines that idea of medical model of disability, that there's something ingrained with the person that makes the disability, but also the social model where it's the world around the person that creates the disability.
Okay.
So there's definitely some different things about people with autism that make us interact with the world differently. But if you put us in a world that has the supports we need and has the right sensory input, then some of those challenges can be lessened. So it can really just kind of change based on where we are in the situation.
Yeah.
So
Go
it
ahead.
sounds like there's a lot of moving parts, I would say, to the diagnosis of autism.
Absolutely.
It can be social dysfunction to a degree, physical, sensory. So where do you, how do you, boy, I'm afraid to say this, how do you quantify everybody that's on the spectrum?
So there's DSM criteria, obviously, and there's a
Right.
checklist of things that have to be present, including things like social and emotional reciprocity challenges, so like the give and take, or knowing how to go back and forth in a conversation. There's challenges that have to be present, such as repetitive behaviors.
Oh, sure.
So for some people, it might appear in stimming behavior. Stimming is a term that we use in the autism community for repetitive behaviors that people do that kind of regulate their system. So like you might see people with autism flapping or rocking or pacing. These are all stimming behaviors that are used to kind of regulate the sensory system. You have to see adherence to routines. There has to be some sort of communication differences. There's a whole list of criteria. I wish I had it in front of me because it's a lot to remember.
Yeah.
So, just quick though, like the flapping, is that kind of a release for them, a calming type of thing?
Absolutely, it's our body's most natural way. So when you have a lot of sensory input, sometimes inside as an autistic person, you can feel a lot of things that just kind of feel very, very overwhelmed or anxious or stressed out.
Right.
And then our bodies have built-in natural coping mechanisms for that.
Okay.
Sometimes it's flapping. Sometimes I personally seek out a lot of deep pressure. So you might, if I'm talking to you, you might see me move to a doorway and just stand there and push because that gives that deep pressure
Relax.
feedback.
Oh, you'll be in a door frame.
Yep, and like I'll be pushing in the doorway, or like I sit on my hands a lot for that deep pressure. So a lot of us have already learned just by listening to our body's cues how to get the sensory input that we need.
Right.
Unfortunately, a lot of society says these things aren't appropriate.
Sure.
Like how many of you, like I'm sure you've been in a kindergarten classroom when they say quiet hands are listening hands.
Oh, right.
Well, if you're
right.
an autistic person, flapping means that I'm regulating my system and I'm more likely to be able to listen to you.
Right, right.
Yeah. So with the, like, you know, you do work for the Autism Society of Minnesota. How long have they, you know, been around in that?
This is actually our 50th birthday.
Wow.
We were established in 1971.
Oh, wow. I would have thought maybe like 20 years ago, because that's when we started really hearing about autism. So back in 71,
1971.
that autism was known back.
Autism has gone, the diagnosis of autism has gone even farther back than 1971.
I would imagine now, yeah.
There's a fantastic book. It's called Neurotribes. It's written by a gentleman named Steve Silberman. It was actually on the New York Times bestseller, and it looks at the entire history of neurodiversity. And they can trace autistic traits and autistic behavior patterns all the way back to the 1700s with William Cavendish, who was considered the grandfather of chemistry. Like we can look at people like Albert Einstein. There's so many figures in history that had we had a DSM, we would have looked at them and be like, yeah, that guy's autistic.
Who would you say is individuals well known that have autistic? I mean,
Oh, there are so many.
yeah, I would imagine. I mean, anyone that just kind of comes to your mind that that we would be.
I can nudge that to say that Elon Musk went on Saturday Night Live and said, I'm autistic.
He did, yes.
Yeah, that's right.
It was
yeah.
it was
Yeah,
kind
he
of
was
a
one
big
of them.
splashy way to do it, but
And like Dan Aykroyd has come out as having autism.
Oh, that's right. I recently heard. Yep.
Steve Jobs is suspected to be autistic. There's famous autistic advocates like Temple Grandin or Haley Moss that are really widely known as being autistic in the media. So
Yeah.
I want to kind of switch to a little funness here, if you will. We just got through the state fair, and the state fair in itself is sensory overload for most people. But they introduced the sensory room this year for people with autism or just people who have difficulty with sensory perception, overload. Was that something that the Autism Society had any assistance in kind of nudging along? Or
we didn't work on the state fair one, but we've been involved in a lot of other ones. Like we have worked with several major league sports teams. Children's Hospital now has a sensory kit that's available on every unit of the hospital.
Okay.
One of my favorites is the Minnesota Wild, though.
That's
they
right.
do something.
I was just trying to remember who it was. The
And
Wild.
they do something a little bit different. They don't have a room like a lot of places. They actually have sensory materials at their guest services. So you can go and say, I need sensory support. They pull out this laminated menu. You pick out what you want. They put it in a bag so you can take it back to your seat so that you have the sensory support you need while watching the game.
Oh, that's fantastic.
We've worked with Guthrie Theater on doing some sensory-friendly performances.
Yeah.
And actually, we're in the process. We have a bill on Capitol Hill right now that would require that any event that has a permit to be an event that is expecting over 1,000 attendees would be required to provide sensory-friendly accommodations.
Okay.
Well, you mentioned the theater. What kind of accommodations could a theater should do in that?
The Guthrie is one of my favorites. I say that about all of them, though.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
When you're in the moment, it feels like your favorite. The
Yeah.
Guthrie does specific sensory-friendly performances. So the theater lights are up a little bit.
Oh, they are
They
up,
provide
okay.
social narratives so people know what to expect when they come. They have sensory tools on hand like noise-canceling headphones or
Okay.
fidgets. They have a quiet space available. And the most important part of it is that you get to come as you are. So if you have a child that needs to move during the performance, the child can move. If you're an adult that maybe makes some noises when you're excited, you can make those noises during the performance and nobody's going to judge you. You're not going to be asked to leave the theater.
Right.
You're
And
going
that's
to be
the big thing right
appreciated as a
there.
patron.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
We had the opportunity last year to actually speak to the artistic director and the disability coordinator with Guthrie Theater, and they spoke of that, and they actually said the sensory performances are some of their favorite.
I stand in the back of the theater and cry every year. It's not fully Christmas until I get to attend the sensory performance of A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
But
yeah.
I mean, they enjoy it because they can almost have like a feedback from the audience and know, how they're affecting people, and almost interact with them in that manner.
And I think it's so important that the Guthrie has taken this on, because when we think about accessibility, a lot of times we're only talking about things like the DMV, schools, hospitals,
Sure.
places that people consider normal functions of life.
Right.
But I think that anyone can agree that culture and art
I was
are a
just
normal
yeah.
function of
Yes,
life.
exactly. I agree.
And we should have equal access to culture and art. Like, we've worked with the Bell Museum. We work with Twin Cities Pride, which is
Oh,
one of
you
my
did?
most favorite events every year, like 400,000 people. And I love Twin Cities Pride sensory space for the fact that they didn't put it in a corner.
Yeah.
Oh,
They,
that's
the
good.
sensory friendly tent at Pride is dead center in the middle of the park.
Oh,
that's
it is.
good.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's air conditioned.
So it's
Oh.
not hard. It's not hard to find. It's
No.
and
And no
it's
matter
an
where you
enjoyable
are,
experience.
no matter
Yeah.
where you are in the park, you are an equal distance from the tent. Like any of the four corners. It's,
that's fabulous.
It's incredible. I sit there the whole weekend and I run it, and it's my favorite place on earth.
And so part of what you do also then is just help encourage other festivals and such
I'm
to
trying.
do that.
I'm trying.
It's a
In
tough
my
sell.
perfect world, every event would have sensory-friendly space. Because I mean, if we think about the law says that every event has to have accommodations for people with physical disabilities. Why are
Right.
people with neurological differences or with intellectual disabilities being left out of the conversation about
Exactly.
accessibility?
And that's part of having the invisible disability.
Exactly.
It's like physical, yep, he's disabled, but yeah, the invisible, no, there's nothing wrong with them, that type. Now, I was looking at some stuff about, Minnesota Autism Society, and it says something here about scholarships and waivers. Can you touch on that a little bit?
So our scholarships are for any of our programming. So we want to make sure that all of the programming we do at the Autism Society is accessible to everyone.
Okay.
So we run classes. We have skill shops that are like one-night classes on a specific topic.
Okay.
We have community-based social skills classes. We do conferences. In fact, just around the corner is our Autistic Community Summit, which is a conference by autistic people for autistic people.
Okay.
Wow.
And all of these great programs are there. But I mean, obviously, it costs money to run programs, so a lot of them have a fee. But we want to make sure that it's accessible to everyone in our community, so we always have scholarships available. And we can also work with counties. Like if you have a disability waiver, a lot of our stuff can be paid for through waiver programs.
And
with the
waivers
state.
are county
Yep.
paid type things and that, so.
Okay. So, we're reaching into the fall. You have the conference. Any other events coming up with the Autism Society that, we want to let people know that exist, that can get involved?
Well, we have a fantastic catalog that was just released that has all of our fall programming for our social classes, our social outings, all of our wonderful skill shops. I know that I believe it's January, I'm leading a skill shop on creating autism-friendly social gatherings.
Oh, fun.
And then in April, we have our statewide conference coming up, and we're already prepping for that.
Wow, okay.
And then, the one thing I was looking here, you mentioned there's therapy, obviously, and meet the therapist and that. But I guess my question about the therapy is, is each therapist uniquely trained in a different area, or is there the same type of therapist that can deal with the issues with autism?
So all of our therapists definitely have their own niche and like the things that they work best with.
And that would be.
I think that's normal for any therapy office.
Yeah, yeah.
What sets our therapists apart is our therapy. As an autistic adult, I can speak to the fact that not every therapist that checks a box and says that they understand autism actually understands autism. There's a lot of misperceptions. There's a lot of stereotypes about autism, but our therapists only see autistic adults.
Okay.
And that's what they do all day. They're surrounded by a great community of autistic adults. They're surrounded by other people in the community. So they're really well informed. It's the only group that they work with. So they get things on a much deeper level than your average therapist that sees a wide variety of diagnoses. So they're fantastic. They're some of my favorite therapists. Sometimes I wish I could see them, but I work there.
Yeah.
And see that you offer camps. Now, is that mostly for children with autism?
No.
Or you have adult camps as well?
Our camps don't have any age cutoff.
Ah,
We have
Oh,
three.
really?
Yeah, we have three
Okay.
different camps. We have Camp Wahode. This is our day camp. It's for our youngest campers to about age 12, and they get to go home to mom and dad every night. But they still also get to hang out in a really autism inclusive setting during the day.
Very cool.
Then we have Camp Discovery.
Okay.
This is our camp for individual campers that are a little bit more independent with their autism, and they just want to be in a space with other people like them and connect with their community. And that camp, I don't believe that one has an age cutoff. I might be wrong. But that's like a 4-to-1 ratio. And then we have Camp Hand in Hand. And Camp Hand in Hand has no age limit. We have adult sessions. And this is our camp for campers that need a little bit more support to be successful. So every camper at Camp Hand in Hand has a one-on-one counselor. And the counselor's only job for that week is to make sure their camper has the best week of their life. Camp is a truly magical place. I wish I could send every person that wants to understand autism to one of our camps for just a couple days and to really get to know our people and to see what our community is like when they're living in a space that's created just for them. In fact, fun fact, our executive director, Ellie Wilson, her very first interaction with our autism community was as a camp counselor, and that's where she fell in love, and now she's leading our organization.
That's great. And you use a lot of volunteers, I presume.
We do use a lot of volunteers, yeah.
And do they get this experience at the camps then, or?
Well, we don't have volunteers at our camps. But we
camps are all
do
prepaid.
always have options for people to apply to be camp counselors.
Okay.
So we do, like, if you're going to camp, we think we should pay you. I'll be honest, it's not a lot, but you get an
but at least
amazing
you
life
get some, yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. So then, educational wise, I see that there's multicultural initiatives, classes, social skill classes. Can you just touch on like the multicultural and some of the other
Yeah,
ones?
so as an organization, we make it, we're very, very purposeful in trying to reach out to other cultures
Right,
and
exactly.
communities. As we look at numbers, we see in Minnesota a higher rate of autism in both the Hmong community and the Somalian community.
Really?
But these are also two communities that exist. There's a very high stigma about autism within these communities.
Oh,
Yeah, some of the religious beliefs
I hadn't even thought of that. Yep.
Yeah, some even believe that autism is a way that a family is being punished for sins of their ancestors.
Oh.
So there's still a lot of stigma to undo. So we've been
Yeah.
working within those communities to try to
Wow.
educate
Yeah,
and bring
that's
awareness.
yeah.
As a whole, though, our education department we teach families, we teach educators, we will teach anyone that wants to learn about autism. We've worked with businesses, churches, movie theaters. If someone comes to us and says, I want to learn about autism, we're like, cool, let's show up. What do you want to know? Currently, we are actually launching a giant training initiative based on a law that was passed in 2020 by the Autism Society. It was a mandate for all law enforcement to be trained in autism
right.
4 hours every licensing cycle. And we've just kicked that off so that officers can get that taken care of before their next licensing renewal.
Well, and I'm going to presume that kind of grew out of a situation that happened in St. Paul on the light rail with a young man with autism that the officers didn't understand.
That was the very beginning, and that started an initiative where we were asking for money to give officers a chance to choose to be trained. Then on August 31st, 2019, in Brooklyn Center, a young man who was 21, his name was Kobe Heisler. He was killed in his home in front of his grandparents during an autistic meltdown.
I do recall that, yes.
And when Kobe lost his life to the law enforcement, that was when it was time for us to stop asking
And
for a
start
chance to make a choice, and that's when we move forward with a bill
Right.
that created a mandate. There are only 5 states in the entire country that have an autism law enforcement mandate,
Okay.
and by far ours is the most innovative. Ours says who has to be involved in developing the training, with autistic adults and their families at the top of that list, and it also highlights what has to be in the curriculum.
Okay.
That's very important because there is a lot of misunderstanding amongst law enforcement on the treatment of people with autism and even other mental health disorders.
There's a list that police officers are trained on in their initial training, and it's a list of, I don't remember what the list is, but it's all the traits that you can look for in someone that indicates that it's going to lead to a violent attack.
Okay.
If you look at that list, it's almost identical to how a person with autism presents before, if they're experiencing emotional dysregulation or they're going to
Yeah.
have a meltdown. But studies show that people with autism are no more likely than an average person to become violent.
To become, okay.
So, but unfortunately, in that dysregulation, if you don't recognize the autism, it very much looks like it could be a physical threat.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that we can teach all of the law enforcement in the state how to recognize autism and to interact more safely with our community.
Real quickly now, as we finish here, if people want more information, website, I would imagine, is the best resource.
Yep, www.ausm.org. We were fantastically gifted with the greatest acronym. This is pronounced awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. So,
That is perfect for you and your group. So, Mark,
yeah, no, I just want to thank
Any
you,
last
Jillian,
words?
for coming in and talking with us. I'm sure we'll, down the road, interact some more on that.
so I'm Charlie Brose. This has been Jillian Nelson and Mark Knutson. We're going to see you next time on Disability Landscape.